Hello and welcome to the Visual Effects Society's webcast series, VFX Pros Home Edition, delivering exclusive interviews and dynamic content amidst these unprecedented times. VFX Pros Home Edition is your channel for VFX stories behind the scenes, live conversations about cutting-edge technologies and techniques, discussions around the VES 70 most influential visual effects films, and more. Today, we're delighted to be talking with award-winning VFX legend, Ken Ralston. We'll begin in just a minute. I'm Naomi Goldman, VES Communications Director. As your moderator, let me share a few housekeeping details. The webcast will run a bit over an hour. The session is being recorded and it will be available later on the VES website and on our social media channels, and we'll post the details at the end of the session. If you are following on Zoom and you'd like to ask Ken a question, please go to the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, click Q&A, and type in your question. If you're on Facebook, please enter your question as a comment. We can't promise we'll get to all of them, but we will do our very best. Let me tell you just a little bit about Ken and then we'll get started. Ken Ralston is a VES Lifetime Achievement Award recipient and has earned 5 BAFTAs and 5 Academy Awards, including a Special Achievement Oscar for the visual effects in Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi, and VFX Oscars for Forrest Gump, Death Becomes Her, The Revolutionary Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Cocoon. He was also Oscar nominated for The Rocketeer, Jumanji, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Dragon Slayer, Back to the Future Part 2, and Alice in Wonderland. Ralston served as the creative head at Sony Pictures Imageworks, and prior to that, played a pivotal role in advancing Industrial Light and Magic's renown over the course of 20 years. Hello, Ken. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm enjoying all the smoke and the virus and everything, but I'm doing good.
Well, we hope you are doing well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
You know, I like to start with the origin story. So can you tell us a little bit about your earliest memories watching movies and sort of some of those early memories?
Well, I was born, I won't go that far back, but when I was a tiny tot, I was fascinated with science fiction films and monster movies and anything weird like that. And I ended up I didn't know why or what was going on, but the films of Ray Harryhausen really made me amazed at the visuals that were going on in the movies I loved. And Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, I know a lot of people mentioned that movie as their turning point. Probably was mine too, going to the theater as I don't know how old I was. And it was a reissue. Sitting there and just, I have no idea what I was watching. It was amazing. So it must have started some kind of weird process in my mind. And then also makeup effects. In fact, as I was growing up, I actually was more interested in makeup in a weird way. And I was trying my own stuff. There was a great famous monsters book, but it was all by Dick Smith, the great makeup artist. And he had all these things you could try at home. So I was trying a bunch of those things. As time went on, I actually wrote to Forey Ackerman. I'm going to go to that for a moment because in a very amazing way, Forey really probably was one of the biggest influences in where my career went. It was the only magazine out there with any information, how distorted it was, about the business. There'd be images of Kong and some of Ray's movies and his terrible puns. If some of you don't know Famous Monsters or Forrest J. Ackerman, you can look him up and see a little bit of what that was about. And it really it really was a magazine I looked forward to every week. So that was fueled. And at one point I wrote him. He invited me to his house, which was called the Acker Mansion in his magazine. And a friend of mine and myself went, and we met John Berg. Besides Forey, we met John Berg and Bill Hedge, who he invited over. And they were working at a place called Cascade. And they did visual effects commercials like Pillsbury Doughboys and Green Giants. And they kind of gave us a tour of the place. And Glenn Anderson and myself, my friend, we, I think it was after that, we had been making 8mm movies. So we decided to take a year. Of course, we were going to school, so we had to do it when we weren't studying, and do a movie, and we called it The Bounds of Imagination. I'm trying to make this short. And it was an excuse to try a lot of visual effects. We were like 13 and 14 years old with a tiny Bolex 8mm camera. And it was like a Walter Mitty type of story, just for the excuse of being able to have my imagination take me to this place, and then I look at this over here, and there's something else going on. And we did that over a course of a year. We showed some of the reels to the gang at Cascade Pictures, and based on that, both Glenn and I got a summer job there. And people who were there were like Dennis Murin and Dave Allen, besides John Berg and Bill Hedge, and Phil Tippett and Lane Liska, and this amazing group of people that these two young punks show up and are doing stop motion for some terrible kids film that they were doing. But it was a start. So that was like the first real professional thing that I did. I went off to CalArts for a little bit, wasn't happy with that. And when I came back, I managed to get back at Cascade. And really, it kind of really was starting there. While we're at Cascade, Dennis Murin has connected with some crazy script called Star Wars. And he got on it, and then he gave me a call and asked me if I wanted to be his camera assistant on that movie. I said yes, and thank God. And Dennis was also a huge part of where my career went. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I hope, of some of the things that happened.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, going back into the late 70s and working on Star Wars and, memories that stand out? And I also remember you telling me what it was like when you first saw the finished product on the big screen. So can you go back to working on that film a little bit?
Sure. What I do remember is while we were at Cascade, Dennis had the script. You could do that back then. It wasn't like some high security zone where no one could even think about the script without a bunch of security guys following you around. So we had it. I can remember we were sitting in, I forget whose car it was. It might have been John's. And we were going to lunch or had lunch from Cascade, and he was reading some pages out of it. And it felt a lot like the kind of script all of us would love to have made, but who would ever let us do such a thing? And then he got on it. Okay, great. So we get on he calls me up, I say yes. I walk in, I don't know what's happening. And just started to fight our way through trying to do the movie. And the things I remember is just how ragtag it was. It was a mess, this industrial part of Van Nuys and the building we were in. And it was just, and there was crazy stuff going all over. There was the model shop was doing, sections of the Death Star trench and the surface, all the spaceships. And it was also a learning experience for them and me and Dennis and everybody, because we had this motion control camera system. So it was just fighting our way through this thing. If you could have seen our screening room, there must be images. I should try to find one, but what a disaster. It looks like the couches and the chairs, they must have found in some junkyard somewhere. Anyway, that's where we would sit and watch our dailies. And it was just a difficult, weird, awkward time. I mean, some of us had a deep sort of connection with visual effects and been thinking about it and studying it forever. And then we were trying to apply some of what we thought was working in those movies that we knew about, and doing it with the camera system that was there and what was going on. Ralph McQuarrie was there painting matte paintings, of tattooing, and we were shooting that. And it was very, very cool. Yes, sometimes you'd feel like that. I just put that on just because it's Citizen Kane, which is also a great film. Look at all those models. See, you actually got to touch and feel those things, light them with real lights, shoot them with cameras. I guess for some of you, you probably go, God, that sounds horrible. But for me, it was the best way, and it was the most exciting way to do the work. And really, it was an astounding time. We didn't know it at the time what was going to happen, of course. We all went our separate ways after that. And also working, being around George was very, very interesting. And I think my fondest memory of that is asking about the trench sequence. There was a handful of us, Dennis, I think Richard Edlund and Doug Smith was there, and a group of us around the trench, which was probably just being, put together so it could be shot. And directors, really interesting, good directors, are able to do this, which is an amazing thing, which, of course, he's lived with this movie for a long time. He's been beaten up by the studio a lot. And yet we're standing there and George starts talking about the sequence. So anyway, diving down, and as he's going on, his enthusiasm and excitement just pulled us in, just made us go nuts. And we couldn't wait to get involved with it. Plus, he did his version, which maybe was one of the first version of, I'll call it previs, but by cutting together old images from war movies and some stuff like from Flying Tigers that the Lydecker brothers had done. I remember some of those shots. We would try to duplicate those with the X-Wings, the Y-Wings, whatever ship was supposed to be in there. And we would look at those sequences and get even more excited. Then we would go out on the stage and beat ourselves up trying to shoot. I look back at it now, some of the simplest things, but it was so hard back then. My God. Anyway, yeah, those were fun, bizarre times. Yeah.
You worked on episode, let's see, 4, 5, and 6. When you went from, after you got through that first Star Wars, the 1977 film, what did you do? What do you recall sort of carrying with you to the next one, to Empire Strikes Back, and then to Return of the Jedi, in terms of, what worked so well, we kept it going, and what were some of the lessons learned, that you took to kind of continue through the franchise?
Well, let's see. What did we take with us? Well, a lot of things were pretty crude on the first Star Wars, just doing it. For me, it could be as simple as trying to shoot the Millennium Falcon. It was so painful because it weighed about 1,000 pounds, it felt like. And doing the simplest shifts with it was kind of difficult. And it looked like on Empire, I was going to be doing a lot of Millennium Falcon stuff, and I wanted to make it more acrobatic. So you make a decision. You say, I need a smaller, lighter weight model so I can do all the stuff I want to do with it. And I think that was true of I think a lot of the models were improved by how they were constructed. The model guys, which were brilliant, did an awful lot of improvements on how they put these things together and the mechanics inside each one of them. Camera-wise, we improved on the Dykstra Flex, which is what we called it. And they came up with a longer tracked, better technologically camera system somewhere during that process. I guess it was then. It's very confusing at this point. And we had so many elements to shoot, all the cameras were working all the time. So the more cameras, the more equipment that they could build, the more elements we could shoot and just get these movies done in a sort of a timely fashion, if you can call it that. And just also, we all knew, because a lot of us who were on the first one were on the second one, or on Empire. Second one, I keep forgetting. Oh, I mean the fifth one, sorry. And it was a learning process. So at least we all walked in knowing the beast that was waiting for us and it wasn't a complete surprise. So that helped.
Do you have a memory of when you saw the first Star Wars, the finished product, up on the screen, and when you all realized what kind of cultural phenomenon you were part of?
There's actually two parts to that. For me, we knew that the trailer had been done with whatever shots we had, which were very few. And it was playing with, local theater was playing it with King Kong, the De Laurentiis Kong. Anyway, and so I think we took a long lunch, and Dennis, John Berg, and myself went and saw it. And I think the music's from like Vivaldi, The Seasons. But there's something in that trailer, if you haven't seen it, that well, plus we had a lot, sort of resting on what it was going to turn out to be, but it was very exciting. And then we went back to work and we kept shooting. So we were going to have our premiere, and it was during the middle of the day. I think it was at Grauman's. Was it at Grauman's Chinese? See, I don't even remember that. What I remember is going in, and I was sitting next to Dennis, and believe me, we had no clue what we were going to see. I passed something I should tell you too, if you haven't already read it somewhere, but during the night shift, which we were doing a lot of work on, Dennis and I would sneak up to the editorial department and look at the black and white dupes of the movie. That's what they used to make. And there was no visual effects, there's no music, there's nothing, there's no sound effects. It's the bare bones of what you're working on. And some of it was looking a little shaky. So we weren't sure what we were in for. We had no idea what the music was going to be. So we sit there, the lights go down, and Duck Dodgers, the great Chuck Jones cartoon, comes up. And that's the first thing they ran. So we got all in the right mood. Then the film came on with that great beginning. And through the whole course of it, I think Dennis and I felt like we were watching someone else's movie. It was so astounding. We had no idea it was going to be so overwhelming. And it was great to see the shots in there, and just, we were stunned. I felt like it was, I don't know, I was in shock, I think, a little bit. And afterwards, I don't think anyone, we were all just sort of babbling about what we had just seen. And it was fun to watch also when the film came out. Just the stories about the lines going around the block several times, and just the insanity about people wanting to see it. So it's a great feeling, of course. You work on something and work really hard, and then it comes out and turns into that. And I take full responsibility for how great it is. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. I have those same memories, the actual images where we were lining around the block. Sometimes we ask people, are you a Star Trek or a Star Wars person? And you're of course, you are both, having worked on multiple Star Trek movies as well as multiple Star Wars movies. So I already have some questions from some folks on Team Star Trek. Can you talk a little bit about, for example, any war stories from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan?
Oh, you want to hear those stories? Let's see, war stories. Actually, it's probably sort of based on my own sort of arrogance, even back then, instead of now. But I do remember, because, being on set and everything, it was all very new for a lot of us. And I went down, I know I did a lot of planning on, I wish I could remember what scene it was. It must have had something to do with the SETI Eels. That's why I would have been down there at Paramount Studios. And Nicholas Meyer was the director. He did such a great job on that film. And, but at the time, no, they were never getting to the work we had to do. We were wasting a lot of time, a lot of effort. And what an idiot I was then. I got so pissed off. I left the studio and went to visit my sister. What a jackass. But anyway, I was. And came back the next day and we shot our stuff. But I wouldn't do that now to save my life. I mean, my God. So that's something. It actually, and Mick really wasn't that terribly involved with the visual effects. The storyboards by Mike Miner, who actually also was someone that worked at Cascade off and on when I was there, were pretty explicit about what you had to do. And Bob Sallin, one of the producers, really kind of oversaw the visual effects. And it was actually one of the best experiences I've ever had on a show because we had so much freedom. And by doing that, you don't have to check in constantly with some of the studio heads who don't know what you're doing anyway, half the time. And you can move faster, more efficiently. You can save money doing it. And I think back in those days, which is so not now, for you visual effects producers out there, you certainly will know what I'm talking about, is there was this much money. Okay, that's all you needed to know to do all the visual effects. You didn't have to micromanage every damned frame you were shooting. You didn't have to do all that stuff. You just had to get it done in a certain amount of time for a certain price. So what that does is it really gets your fires burning, your creative juices flowing about how to do that. And if you can really work on all 8 cylinders, it's a great way to work. And you know, as a supervisor and as everyone else working on it, what's important and what's not. And it was very helpful. It was a great experience. And it's so funny, it's still referenced now. I mean, I see references to especially Shatner's Khan moment constantly. It's so bizarre.
Yeah,
I will say this, here's a war story. It's not even a war story, it's just a weird moment. Ricardo Montalban is, of course, Khan. And the first day of his shooting on the Botany Bay ship, I think is what we were doing, somebody had found got a radio controlled device for some reason. On it put a inflatable human figure, must have been a child's figure, and they stuck Hervé Villechaise's face photo on the front of it and ran it into the set while he was out there to welcome him to Star Trek. So there's that.
That's great.
Tacky.
All right, we're gonna go to the next movie, and dealer's choice, we're gonna go to Death Becomes Her. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of those really iconic scenes, such as Meryl Streep falling down the stairs and her neck twisting straight around. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to that and some other effects in that movie?
Well, a little prehistory would be that at the time that movie started, Bob Zemeckis was talking about doing 2 different movies. One would have been The Life of Houdini, which had some interesting challenges visual effects wise, and also The Life of Tesla and the robber barons in America at the time, which I so wanted to do. So I got a phone call from Bob Zemeckis. Hello. He says, so Ken, if a woman fell down a flight of stairs and her head twisted around 180 degrees, how would you do that? And I just said, so we're not doing Houdini or Tesla, are we? He goes, no. In a very strange way, I approached doing the movie because I like physical, visual things in front of me, as dumb as what I'm about to say is. But I bought a Barbie doll, drew some little Sharpie marks on the neck, and just twisted the head around and held it, and was thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? How are we going to make this work? So that started the process. One of the most helpful things that happened on that film, because the sequence was so hard, all of the sequences, but especially the head twisting scene and then the fight, but especially the head twisting scene, talked it over with Bob, and he wound up having us come down to Paramount, I think is where the sets were. And they weren't even all the way built. They were roughed in. Everything was kind of the right shapes. Put some props in there. Hired 3 actors, not the main actors, just people for the day. And we shot on video the entire sequence. He cut it together. We all sat around and talked about the cuts. And it was so helpful to be able to look at the exact thing you were doing close enough anyway, and then start to devise a way to pull it off. Well, you got to also remember it was in the early days of computer graphics, digital effects, and it was a very chancy way to approach it. So I tried to minimize as much of it as I could. So we shot Meryl. She had a makeup on, but she didn't like wearing it. So she asked me if it was okay not to wear it. And I told her, oh no, wait, of course I would do what she says. And she took it off, and she was doing the whole scene, and we discussed what that would be like if your head was turned around. So she did so much great stuff, of course, for that scene. But then we shot her against blue screen for her face. So we had to go through in our funky approach to this thing, where we would look at the cut footage of the set where she was doing all that stuff. And of course, Bob would do scenes that would only he would want to do to torture us, I think. Plus it was important to the story, where she sits at the table and her reflection, of course, is in a mirror. So we have double duty there about what we're trying to do visual effects wise. And so we shot her with some very rough timings on where her head is, what the lighting's doing. I'm trying to remember why we had to do this, but I know we had to replace her ponytail. So we actually had a third shoot back at ILM with a ponytail against blue and matching her head movement and stuff. So half the time that's even put in. Anyway, so we devised what that would be based on the video cut that Bob did, and then we shot it, and it actually helped tremendously. The work, of course, was horrifically complicated. And there's some, if I remember right, I know to try to save processing time and just scanning and all of that stuff going through the computer was so painfully slow and difficult. I think to help speed things up, I did a split. I'm never going to get this exactly right now, where we had Bruce Willis on one side of a shot, and I used the film version of that. Then we had Meryl with her digitally altered body, her neck and her head, and did a split because it speeded up just getting the shot done, because it was a long shot and she's walking up towards Bruce. He's in the foreground. I think he's leaning on the floor or something. And she's doing that long walk when she's first revealing what her problem is. So there's that. And then we had the fight scene, which was probably the next hardest part of the movie. And that was just, I think I approach most movies the same way, which is I know where we're at technologically with the crew. And then we do a movie where, half of that is impossible, especially with Bob. And you just have to white knuckle it through the whole thing, brute force your way through and just try stuff where the technology is at that minute, and then try to push it even further and try things. If it's not working, like maybe when she pushes her head way up and that stretching neck was stupidly hard, then maybe with lighting or something, you can fake, getting away with some issues or a little diffusion or whatever it is. And you kind of fight your way through. It's not done out of being a masochist or anything, but it really does help push the knowledge of what the technology is capable of, and then that can be taken to the next project. And it was the only way to do some of these things without it being a disaster. So we walked into it knowing it was going to be a real difficult moment, these scenes in the film. And then Naomi, I think you've mentioned you like the scene with the shovel handle getting thrown, and Goldie sitting back and what we did with that. And in a weird way, it was one of the simpler scenes because we would shoot endless plates. We would do the blank plate with the shovel handle landing in the couch, then no shovel handle, of course, and then we would shoot Goldie walking in where we knew the shovel handle was. And she had her makeup piece on her outfit, and she did her scene. And what was fun is to do the small things that you're probably not thinking about it, but it makes it work so much better, is those little nuances where she sits down and the shovel handle's there, but we were able to manipulate not just the hole in her stomach, but the handle. So it sort of stretches and pushes the flesh up a little bit. It's a small thing, but in the end, it really helps shots work so much better. it's sort of a subconscious thing you see, and you know it looks amazing, but you're not quite sure why. And then there's all the other work, but why go into all of it?
Thank you. I love that movie. Let's pivot to another Robert Zemeckis movie, Forrest Gump. So many amazing things on another one of your Academy Award winning projects. One, breaking new ground and weaving archival footage seamlessly into the film story. So there's a couple things I'd love for you to touch on. One, sort of that approach to, allowing Forrest Gump to shake hands with various, presidents and powers that be, as well as, crowd scenes in the National Mall. Can you talk a little bit about that part of the work on this remarkable project?
It's there's a lot of different things in that movie, and that's what made it fun too, and horrifying at the same time. But we could do the archival footage again. Bob would go through all this footage, and he had a team of folks doing it with him, pick the scenes he wanted to use, and then we would sit down and discuss. If Tom comes into this scene, like when he shakes the hand of John F. Kennedy, which was the first scene we did as a proof of concept test, was Kennedy with Tom looking over saying, I guess we didn't even have Tom, it must have just been Kennedy, turning around saying, I guess he wanted to go pee, or he has to go pee. Isn't it funny? I don't remember the line exactly. And that was the first thing we tested on how manipulating the mouth. So we knew kind of where we were going with it, and Bob would pick some very difficult shots to use. The one where Gump shakes JFK's hand, it actually has, I remember right, there's someone in the shot who exits, I think, and a woman comes in a white outfit or a light outfit, and that's the hand that he shakes, I think, and then she exits. So we have to get rid of those people through a lot of digital trickery. And then we have to shoot Tom. That was against Blue also. And again, I hate getting too overly technical unless it's necessary on set with any actor, even someone as good as Tom is on everything. But how simple can we do this and get what we need without it being so technologically huge, it starts to impact maybe a performance, which can happen sometimes. So we just had some, if I remember it, some century stands sitting there with little tape marks, probably with a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And these are marks he has to hit with a click track. And we're playing the Kennedy footage on a soundtrack and on the set. And really, I'm just sitting there, or I guess Bob or me, I forget who was doing it. But he'd hit a mark and I would just say, shake, 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 because he had to shake 3 times and then go out of the scene. And it still was a bit of a pain in the ass to match up in those days, the hand of Tom's hand with Kennedy's hand. So you thought he was shaking his hand. I suppose if you looked at it frame by horrible frame, you'd probably go, wait a minute. But that's not what I'm making the movie for, is it? I'm making it for sitting in a theater, hopefully, and hopefully you get to do that again someday, and watching it as it should be watched. So some things you let slide because you got a lot more work to do, and you have to get it done on time. And a lot of it was that. It was Tom against Blue, same with George Wallace, and shooting that. And we shot the whole scene, I think he shot at the exteriors were UCLA, not too far from here. And then the archival footage, we put him in against Blue again and gave him eye lines. Here's George, and here's any character he had to relate to. All that was laid out on the blue screen set, so he knew what the hell was going on. And we would shoot it and keep going about it. And if there was a lot of intricate timing, like with the handshake with JFK, you just have to keep doing it till visually you go, we got it, let's move on. And then some of it, of course, I don't think is as effective as I wish it had been, for weird reasons, like John Lennon with the Dick Cavett show. Got to meet Dick Cavett, though. That was fun. And once you start to scrutinize how people talk, it can be kind of intimidating. So Lennon's there, and we put Tom in, okay. And it has a very different quality for that archival footage. It's on videotape. The George Wallace thing was very grainy. Kennedy had a different look because it's all different stocks and everything. So that was another problem we had to solve. But when you look at Lennon, when he talks, it's very closed mouth, kind of out of the side of his mouth. And it was so hard to get that to make sense with what our voice talent was doing the Lennon voice, you know, making it up. And I still watch that and go, you can, I can feel it's not quite nailing it sometimes. But other than that, I can't help but see the problems. That's just the way it is.
You know, another standout from the movie was turning Lieutenant Dan into a double amputee, which was astounding, you know, to a lot of film goers, you know, who watched the movie and didn't really kind of understand what they were or were not seeing. Can you talk a little bit about the approach to that work on the character?
Well, the approach was, instead of just painting his legs out and kind of approaching it in a very simple way without any, again, talking about the subtleties of what I was mentioning about Death Becomes Her. So here's the subtleties for Lieutenant Dan. They're all hard. The first time you see him without his legs, he's in the hospital. The intern picks him up and does all that. So what I did was, I think we had a hole in the bed, so his real legs are down inside this hole inside the bed. And on his legs, on his knees, if I remember right, we had like some bandages. I put the bandages there a certain way to help us with this gag, because there's so much difficult work involved. We had a certain simple shape to it, white bandages. So in manipulating where the cutoff is on his real legs to the bandage, it helped us out this much. So he gets picked up, he's carried around, there's a lot of painting out going on and a lot of intricate, again, brute force. It was the only way to get through it. And sometimes it's the most effective way, because you might do something safer as a supervisor and chicken out, but it won't sell it as much. So that followed through on several moments in the movie. One was he's on the top, or he's on the edge of the shrimp boat they're on. He's about to jump off and go swimming towards the beautiful sunset. And so I had him cut out a big section of the boat, take it out. His legs, again, are hanging down, and he has his bandages on, and he swings right through that physical space. Now, if his legs were lifted up, everything would look different. His knees would look different. His body language would look different. So didn't want to do that. And it was also a subtle thing to help the audience just totally buy what was happening. So he does his scene. He goes flying off into a mattress or something, because he never really went in the water. And then we shot a blank plate with no one in it with that piece back in, and then just painted the seams back in so it looked like a solid section of the boat, and did all the horrible work necessary and put it together. And so there's that. And then the other one I'll mention is he's tossed out of his wheelchair in his shitty apartment. And same thing, we had a physical object right where his legs should go. And we did that in a blank plate. It was what was that? It was like a, can't remember, a tabletop of some sort. And then when he did his scene, he swung his legs right through that physical space in a way that could never have happened if he had real legs. It would have hit this object I put in there. So on a separate pass, the table's put in, all the other work takes place, and it just helps sell the fact that he really does have this problem.
Fantastic, thank you. Let me tell you the top question we're getting right now, which is, we're going to pivot to yet another of your films with Robert Zemeckis, which is Contact. And I know you've talked many times in the past about what you call either the mirror shot or the medicine cabinet shot with a young Jodie Foster character kind of running down the hallway. So we want to explore that a little bit. I guess the first question would be, you know, what kind of early discussions were had about that shot and what it represented?
Well, the earliest discussion had nothing to do with that shot. That moment was going to be done very differently. That's what we talked a lot about it, which was she was going to come down. We were going to go with her, was going to come down, and we were going to do the, which is now bullet time, everyone calls it now, that Matrix did so well, but it was also done in a very effectively in a Rolling Stones music video is what we were studying. And it was going to have the popcorn that her father had. Everything was up in the air. He was in mid-fall and everything was going to be frozen as she walks around and sees he had died or was dying. So we're exploring that. We're going down that road farther and farther. And then Bob came up with this other idea, which was better. Of course, Bob. And you know what the shot is, so I probably don't have to explain it. You know, we come up the stairs, but these are my memories. Our cameraman had to run up those stairs with young Ellie so many times. He was about to pass out till we finally got a take that worked. So he comes up with her, and we follow her towards us. We're doing a point of view. We're watching her. She's coming at us. And then had to figure out, in a weird way, it's what I love about this shot. Technically, it's not the hardest shot in the world. Conceptually, it's, well, watch what I say. It's brilliant. And all because of Bob, you know. So as we pull back, you have to think, well, if we're coming into the mirror, I have to shoot this mirror, at least make it look like a mirror. So we set up, I can't remember how many days after we actually shot her, probably months. So we had a little tiny set piece with the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. There's no mirror in it, of course. It's a blue screen probably is what we put in there. And we do the shot. We start in on the blue, we pull back, revealing the mirror. And then we have somebody else open it, timed to what Ellie's doing. So we time it with what we shot on the plate with her. That gets opened up, medicine's boom. And as it closes, we had to shoot plates of sets and everything to put it in there with all the distortions and everything to make you believe as it's slowly closing, it was all real. To the point where I think we put a little bevel on the very edge of the mirror, distorted that a certain way so it looked like a physical object. You know, it had a little shape to the mirror even. And there's little schmutz on it that we put on, try to make it look like kind of not a quite clean mirror. And there you go. Put it together and again, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears just doing it so it works right and it's subtle. And that's always the hard part. You can do the first 95% of any shot and get there. It's that last 5 or 10%, if you really want to make it special, that can be so difficult. And, but again, those are the kind of challenges that are fun.
Yeah, we've talked about this shot as well with Sheena Dougal,
Right.
who we also honored this year at the VES Awards from her perspective as a compositing supervisor. And you know, and folks,
yeah, she beat herself up putting that together.
Yeah. I think some people say that part of the appeal and maybe the fond memory of that sequence is also that it's in slow motion, which
right.
really means, you know, we really get to fully appreciate the shot. And, you know, sometimes in visual effects shot these days, they go by really quickly, that people can't really comprehend all of what they're seeing. Do you agree with that the slow motion sort of very much added to sort of the legacy of that shot?
Well, it really adds to it because it gives you time to look at her face and what you just witnessed. And it sort of gives it that weird dream-like time is slowing down in terrible moments like this. And it just keeps accentuating that that horrible moment in her life. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have to look at, I haven't seen the movie for a while, and we shot a lot of different things. But the popcorn, if you're paying any attention, if you see you never see him fully at the bottom of the stairs, but the popcorn is sort of laid out in a pattern, sort of a star pattern that is replicated throughout the movie.
Since we're on contact, let me ask you a couple other questions that popped up. So Ellie's trip in the pod, you know, had some of the more fantastical elements like the wormhole and things that were weightless and, you know, coming out of her own body. So how did you approach these space-like effects?
Well, there's so many different types of visuals in that moment. The weightless stuff, well, you know, it's been so long, sorry folks, but I'm sure we had her on wires for some of it. We, you know, everything, each shot is a different set of problems. So you just kind of approach each one differently. I know we had Weta doing work on it. We had ILM doing work on it besides the work that Sony was doing. And just, it was spread out because there was a lot of complicated stuff. And I'm sure, like everything, we were running out of time. So we were spreading it all over. And once we got it designed, which was also a big issue about what would really be going on there, we got Jody, who was great, of course, in there, and did some flying rig stuff. We had the chair, which was sometimes CG and sometimes not CG. There's a scene where she looks down and she can sort of see through the translucent pod. So that wasn't the hardest thing in the world to do, but that's just one more aspect of it where you create the image of that point of view of what she would see, and then try to kiss it in a way that isn't just crude. Despite how nuts some of these images are, you still try to find subtleties and kind of a poetry to it that maybe somebody else wouldn't. At least I strive for that. Whether I succeed is a whole other thing. So there's that. There's the weird distortions. That was ILM, where she is saying lines that she says in a different part of those moments where time is being stretched and distorted. A lot of abstract, the tunnel effect, the wormhole, of course, because you know you can't have enough wormholes in movies. That was Weta, I believe, and just it's really about the design of it that works so well, where it keeps increasing in insanity and craziness and sound, and the final moment where all that crap's going on and it just comes to an abrupt stop and she's just sitting there looking at the cosmos, you know, this amazing image, and then boom, you're in it again, and then she's on the beach. At least I got a trip to Fiji out of it.
Yeah, I'm partial to that dreamlike, surreal beach sequence with the alien / father.
Yeah, it was great in a weird way. These are the things you have to enjoy while you're doing these sometimes. And that movie was so hard on so many of us, not just me, but got to this little island. I was just trying to think of the name the other day and I can't. Little tiny place, Fiji. How this beach was picked, I don't know. And we were staying on a little boat offshore. We would come on in the morning. We had already planned everything with my crew. It was just me and my effects guys. And we'd go on the beach, set up, I think we had 2 8-proof cameras, if I'm not mistaken. Do a lot of shots and elements for stitching together and whatnot. And also, while we're there, we meet what they would call their clan, basically the people that are living on the island and indigenous to that place. And it was a joy. In fact, I'm still going to say the same thing. I don't think I've ever seen children so joyful in my life as on that little, you know, rock that they were on. And we had them, I don't want to bore you with too much of this, but we would hire them to do things, you know, so we could, you know, help, you know, pay stuff and have them involved. They could enjoy some of the food we had. They gave us a meal I will never forget, of fresh caught fish from like right out on the beach, to everything cooked right there. Oh my God. So those things happen. And you just have to not let the work bury that in the back of your mind. You just let it, just have some fun. The work's hard enough.
Awesome. We're glad that I think that joy showed through, you know, in the end product of the movie. Before we go to the next movie, we have a few technical questions from folks. One is, you've overseen some amazing shots using only camera elements and compositing. Have you had an opportunity to use the new virtual production techniques with LED walls akin to process plate projection? Either way, what are your thoughts about this new technique?
Oh, I'm sure it's great. I haven't personally used it, but I could see why it would be fantastic. You can eliminate a lot of issues by using it. You get much more of that ambient natural coloration from whatever the background's supposed to be, which can be such a pain doing it with other technologies, especially if you're doing blue screen. Or I hate blue screen and I hate green screen, and I've used it a lot. It's just a nightmare. So the idea of how you can incorporate that into the workflow, how could it not be great? It's all about the shot at the end of the day anyway. It's not about how you get there.
Now, we know you to be a fabulous artist and doodler, maybe there on your desk. And given that you do a lot of the, ooh, who is the, oh my.
Anyway, that's me with the coronavirus never letting me leave this damn house. Anyway.
People are commenting on a lot of the design work you do for characters, and wondering if you have some of your favorite designs, you know, from films that you've worked on.
I know I was telling you guys the other day, catching me at a great time where everything like that is in storage right now. I guess, I mean, my favorite designs, let's see, what would that be? Actually, I like the Seti Ill from Wrath of Khan. That was a very fun thing to do. Plus, in the day of ILM, when if you could do different jobs, you did them. You could do them. So I'm supervising at least about half the shots in the show. I didn't do the whole show. Jim Valou did sections of it also. And got a chance to present design ideas. So one of the tricks we've always used is, what design do you like? So if I like a certain thing, I did a full sculpted maquette of this eel with looked like sand around it, and did all the work on that. And then I probably drew up 5 or 6 other things not so drawn so well to present. And of course they go for the sculpture. So I was glad about that. And I liked how funky I put it together. I'm not a mechanical person, so I can still remember being at lunch in Larkspur Landing, which was near Industrial Light and Magic. Went into I don't know what store it was, and got a little tea strainer, you know, those spring-loaded tea strainers. Mm-hmm. Cut the tea part of it off and put little points on it, and it became, when I bent it, the little mandibles of the Seti eel. How crude. But I also got to sculpt the real one, cast it in foam. I mean, I did the whole thing. Painted it, fixed the shell up, then puppeteered it, and shot it. So that was great. It's a great sort of challenge, and all the creative folks there, anything you could do it. And it just gave you more authorship, I guess, on the work you're doing. So that was cool. That's what I did like. I like the design of the baby dragons in Dragon Slayer also, and got to puppeteer that in London at Pinewood Studios. So that was good.
So I have some clamoring of love. Let's get to Roger Rabbit. So let's talk a little bit about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was really remarkable for combining traditional, you know, animation, live action with this kind of level of seamless integration that really hadn't been achieved. So tell folks how you came on to the project, kind of what was pitched to you and how you jumped into it.
Well, what was pitched to me, it was Bob Zemeckis again, and he had a script, sent it up, and thought it could be terrific. I remember reading it thinking, really? This script is a little funky. And he said, come on down. He wanted to talk about it. So I flew down to Amblin. That's where the offices were at the time at Universal Studios. And walked in, and on his desk, on the conference room desk, was a couple of sculptures I think had been done at Disney of Roger, I think it was Jessica, and possibly baby Herman. And it had such a strong Tex Avery look to it. I was sold on that instant about everything. And another long story short, when I first started in the biz at Cascade Pictures, Tex Avery was working there. He was doing commercials, and I got to work with him on some ridiculous things, but I got to know the man, and then also just explore the cartoons he had done, especially at MGM, that are so insane and brilliant. And so when I saw that connection, I got very excited. That image you're looking at, by the way, I don't even know if we ever took that very far. We had to do some tests to test the theory of Roger Rabbit. And I don't know if, I don't remember if actually we shot me in this shot or not, because Bob came up with a much better test that, what's the actor's name? I think it was Joe Pantaleone, played Eddie Valiant. We shot a test at ILM in our soundstage, and they built a set piece, and Bob did some things, and we tried some interaction and did all that. And there's the great Bob Hoskins, of course. That was actually the last night of shooting in Oakland, California, on some reshoots and some things we had added at a local theater in Oakland. And we were all just having our cake and saying adios. And what a brilliant, great actor. It was such a joy working with him. And talk about a no-nonsense, disciplined guy. It was fantastic. I measure all other actors who do the kind of work we ask them to do in these movies to Bob, because he made it look easy, but it's not. So we did that test and took it through to the end with some animation that was done. I don't even know if it was Richard Williams at the time. Isn't that awful? I can't remember that. And that sold Disney and everyone on the idea that, oh yeah, this could work. In the meantime, I'm studying movies like Anchors Away, and I think it was Anchors Away, with Esther Williams. Is that it? I have to check on that.
With Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, Tom and Jerry swimming around with her underwater. It's very well done. So I try to find references of any kind on a project I'm about to start to get my own creative juices flowing, and see where we can take it. Take that, and then where do we advance it to? What can we learn from it? All that. So a little film history helps. And we started to put the team together. Richard Williams was hired, thank goodness. Great guy and a great animator and all that stuff. And he put his team together in London, in Camden. And it's such a big project, it's hard to describe, but a lot had to occur. ILM, we needed 2 cameras built to shoot in London, 8 perf, everything was 8 perf. VistaVision. And so that was happening, and they had their deadlines to meet. These were from scratch cameras designed and built for this. That was insane. And just walking in again into a giant project, knowing you could get half of it done and see what happened with the rest of it. And just, what are you going to do? And it's a long story. I don't want to bore everybody with too much of it, but just trying to set up how you get your cells and how that's shot in London, what the camera setup is there that makes sense with the camera setup at ILM, taking those elements, putting into background plates. And then we had a team in that Richard was still supervising, but we were doing Toontown in Burbank. And so they were doing that. There was a lot of flying around, a lot of traveling to kill me. And then, you know, there's just such a huge amount of work. But, and I was saying to you guys before, that I love animated cartoons, especially the early days of Disney and the Warner Brothers cartoons and Chuck Jones's cartoons. Those are brilliant cartoons. Tex Avery's at MGM and at Warner Brothers. And so I was able to go to Camden. We'd have meetings there periodically, but then you can go into their rooms at this building, and they were doing everything like it was done. You know, it was animation tables, you know, the paper going down, people drawing away, doing the keyframes. This group's doing the in-betweens. The painters are there, the cells are there, they're inking, painting over here, they're shooting over here. And it was a joy. It was really, it was a dream come true, really, for me. To be able to be involved with a project like Roger and being able to sort of pay, you know, just sort of a respect towards those days.
So a few of the photos we put up prompted some questions. So a question was, for example, did you use cardboard cutouts of characters throughout, you know, to help Bob Hoskins and the others with placement, or how did they work in terms of interacting with animated characters that were not there to kind of help the process? And can you also talk a little bit about Charlie Fleischer on set?
Well, that cutout is something I drew just for our little test. The actual thing that we did was we had a Roger stuffy, some weasels. I'm trying to remember, for some reason, I don't remember having a baby Herman stuffy, but we had foam rubber versions, same size as we wanted them to be, and painted. And we would shoot roughs, basically a run through with camera and everybody, of what Bob wanted the characters to do. And we would all be involved, talking about it. And Bob Hoskins the principals would be there, of course. And they would take it all in. And someone like Hoskins, because this is not digital, this is all analog optical printer land, we couldn't just paint stuff out like you can now. You can leave a truck in a shot and paint it out. Here we had to just kind of rehearse, take everything out, and then shoot it. Camera guys and everything, everyone knew what we were doing. I would watch, obviously would watch what everyone was shooting to make sure there was enough headroom if someone missed something or any of that. But Hoskins was a super genius. And I said, I don't know, I've said it too many times, but he really took us at least halfway to making you believe these characters were in the shots, because he made his performance with nothing was incredible. His eye lines generally were just dead on focused on these characters. And to make things more, actor friendly and also get a better performance out of everybody, Charlie Fleischer was the voice of Roger and the voice of Benny the Cat. But really for Roger, he would show up every day in costume, the same rabbit costume, ears, and they would have him in a sound booth, but basically they would do the dialogue most of the time with Hoskins at that time. And it got a much better tempo, and if there was some ad libs to do or if things changed, you could do that. And it really added a lot just for the fun factor, Charlie looking so bizarre, and just getting the shot to get worked out with everybody. And somewhere out there is a cut of this movie, I'm sure, where all you're seeing are guys with these foam rubber stuffies stomping around the set and doing the scene with Hoskins and whoever else would have been in it. And that's what we would have cut together. And we would sit with the animators at Richards, and Bob would talk through what the scene was and roughly where these characters were. So that thing, got to find that footage because it's so funky.
I know you've talked a lot about how much how much you love Bob Hoskins and the esteem you held him in or hold him in. Do you want to tell the shower scene?
Sure. Again, I think it feels to me like it was towards the end of a shooting, which, by the way, we were pretty beat up. And it was really late. That tells me probably we wanted to get this done. And so it was like 2 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, probably freezing, because most of the time we were in London, it was so cold. I think it even at the time broke records for how cold it was. And there's a scene where, long story short, Hoskins is in Toontown. They paint a big pig's head on him, throw him out of Toontown Tunnel, and he's running around the streets of LA with this head, screaming and yelling. Goes back to his apartment, gets in the shower, washes this off, this paint, and you see it going down this drain, this all animated, of course, this glop. And the last thing you see is the eye of the pig going in the drain. Boom. He turns around, and Jessica's in the bathroom. And Bob is hiding his shame with a shower curtain. And the shot was just supposed to be, we're looking past Jessica in the foreground. She takes a towel and throws it. And in typical Bob Zemeckis wanting this perfect timing, he wanted to drop the shower curtain, grab the towel just in time to hide his R or X-rated part of the movie. And he was wearing a flesh-colored bathing suit or something. Shot after shot. And we, again, can't paint anything out. So we keep seeing this bathing suit over and over. Bob's getting pissed off. Hoskins, and I'm sure Zemeckis too. And Hoskins said, like, he would say this to us all the time if things were going slow or there were delays. He wasn't sure about what was going on. He'd say, are we filming or fucking about? Usually we were fucking about, but anyway, he got so fed up, he just said, that's it. He pulled his bathing suit off and threw it over there and just shot it stark naked. So when he dropped this curtain, it's not even in the movie, but you didn't see any of that. And he grabbed the towel, it hit everything perfectly, and we were out the door, thank God.
Thank you. Just one last question about this movie. Well, it's a two-part. It's sort of a dual question. One, there is a profound number of cartoon cameos in the film with, dozens of Disney characters, dozens of Warner Brothers characters. So question is if you had any favorite cartoon cameos, and also if you have a favorite line from the movie delivered by one of the characters.
Well, by one of the characters. Okay. Well, Jessica Rabbit probably saying, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way, is a perfect line for that movie. And that's one of the better lines. I mean, Joanna Cassidy has a good line too about she's sitting in the theater with Hoskins and she said she had to shake the weasels, which we all knew what we thought it meant. So I thought that was funny. Famous cameos. Let's see, what would it be? Besides, there's all the obvious ones. Betty Boop is my favorite, I think, just because it's a cool character. It's such a weird looking character, that giant head and everything. I think I'd mentioned before that in the old days, when Betty Boop was first being animated at Fleischer Studios, I didn't do this, but on purpose, but Betty would have one frame where her dress would be down and she'd be bare-breasted. One frame where you can't see it. It just looks like a glitch on the film when you're running it in the theater. And I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe the original release of that movie had the same thing on one shot. Just trying to show respect to history, film history, and do it the way they did it. And but I do like that character in the movie, especially because she's black and white. Everything else is in color in the Ink and Paint Club.
If I'm correct, I think Robert Zemeckis is the director you've collaborated with probably more than anybody else between,
sure,
right? Contact, Rabbit, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Back to the Future. What is it about the sensibility that you both share in terms of storytelling and how to use technology and visual effects that you think has created such a rich relationship that's brought so many classic films to light?
I think probably it's not doing visual effects for visual effects' sake. Bob has always a really good reason to do the things he's doing in the movies. Plus he has no fear, so I guess I have to have no fear. And he also is interested in how to change how you communicate these ideas he wants in his films into maybe ways that haven't been done before. How do you visualize something that is better and different than you've seen in the past? Because everything's been done one way or the other. How do you go about finding what that is? And he's obsessed with that, which I think is great. And the challenges that that creates for any visual effects person is tremendous and exciting. And like I say, it's not a bad thing walking into a movie project with someone like Bob with thinking a lot of the work you have no idea how to do at that moment, but you'll work it out. And I think that sort of level of gambling, I guess is what it would be, and challenging yourself is something that we both liked in each other.
Great. A couple questions, given your very long filmography, and it's probably hard to pick, you know, your favorite child or, you know, things like that. So I'll approach it the other direction, which is, are there films that stand out that you worked on where you were the most nervous, the visual effects might not work, or that you might not make the actual deadline?
Every one of them. Let's see. A Contact was a real painful finish. But you know, it's tough to say because most films, all you visual effects people out there know this, never have enough time, it seems. And you can have 5 years, you're still not going to have enough time. Because if you have 5 years, somebody's going to keep changing the work you're doing till you want to kill them. Bob didn't do that, thank God. But some have. Anyway, Contact was tough, but you know, it's really tough to say because they're all, by the end, you're beating yourself up. Roger was, I think I worked 7-day weeks for 9 months, something like that. Always being at ILM, not just me. When I say me, I always mean us, the team. It's never just me. And it was, what's great is you can do that and the film comes out and that's the movie you worked on. Some folks can do that and the movie they come out with is a piece of crap. That's a hard thing to take. So I'm not complaining about how hard the work is. In fact, that's why I guess I'm in the business doing what I'm trying to do, is to keep challenging myself like that. So that's what you get.
Folks are also curious, given the depth of your experience, if you have any thoughts on where you think technology kind of is going next as it relates for visual effects and shooting films, and what should visual effects be thinking about now so that they can evolve to kind of keep sync with future new filmmaking
Lost you there,
technology.
Naomi, a little bit, but
Oh,
where are we going? It's a question everyone always asks. Where are, I think I'm probably always going to say the same stupid, tired thing, which is, technology, well, first of all, it's probably going to keep attempting to go where it's, and by the way, these aren't my priorities. These are whoever's. Cheaper, faster, easier to shoot on set, and it's trying to do that. Then when you do that, when you get that technology right there, then you probably are working with directors that go, well, I don't want to do that. I wanted to do this. Then you're back to square one again, doing something incredibly impossible, something hard, and that's not bad. It just seems to have always been what's going on. It's really about, I think, it's a lot of different things. Really, it's amazing that now it's a global artistic community doing this work, which is great. There's so many talented people involved. It's trying to corral them on a team can be difficult for a supervisor and producers. Just because people are spread out, it does cause weird issues. Not a big deal, but it is what it is. And I think just to please production, it's whatever, when they go out there on a set, instead of everything coming to a horrible halt for some technological reason, anything that helps speed the process up so you're not slowing things down too much for the visual effects team. Don't worry, everybody else is going to go slow and cause nothing but trouble. But remember, you'll be blamed. So that's a good one.
Just for you,
We're
Ken.
always the scapegoat for problems like that.
For you, Ken, and for people listening to know, we'll probably go maybe another 10 minutes and then we'll come to a close. I am being asked, please ask Ken to share any good or bad memories from working on the Back to the Future trilogy.
Okay. Actually, I have a lot of good memories about all three of those movies. The first one, what I remember is, besides, it's going to take too long to go into too much of it. The movie started off a very different set of problems for the visual effects team. It was going to be an atomic explosion, blowing buildings apart and everything on a test site, and that's how the car gets back. That changed dramatically, probably for the price for that movie, and it turned into the lightning bolt and all that. Okay, cool. I also was on Cocoon at the same time, so I was juggling both movies simultaneously. Luckily, it, for the most part, worked out. There's only a few days where I was sort of up for 24 hours at a time on different movies. But it was just fun to watch what was going on the first Back to the Future, coming up with what the car time travel effects would be and give it that kind of crude, insane sort of explosive look. The flying car was fun to do. And then again, even that movie way back then, we almost didn't get that car shot done in time. It's just always that way. And then Back to the Future 2 suddenly got a lot harder with all of the splits and everything we were doing, again, not digitally, doing it analog, and having to build that motion control live action camera system that we use for all of that stuff. But what was exciting about it is coming up with designs of shots that could cheat your way through some ways of fooling an audience into wondering, what did I just see here? Here's Michael here, and there's three Michaels in this dinner table scene, and they're exchanging cups, and they seem to be interacting with each other in some way, which was not easy. Plus, we had a lot of fun things to figure out. Some really fun, stupid things like the shark hologram, whatever it is, in the future town, coming out and going back in. The flying cars are everywhere, the taxi, all that good stuff. It was all really difficult, but the challenges were great, and we just had fun on it. I mean, it was a fun team, and that's so important. You're working hard enough. If you want to be around a bunch of jackasses, then it doesn't help. And then the third Back to the Future, because I love Westerns, was a joy. I mean, and crashing the train, that was really special. Of course, you're always fearful. This wasn't a digital train. It was a quarter scale model on a quarter scale trestle built up in an old rock quarry in Novato, California. I'd found the location by a total fluke, and did that. We had cameras everywhere, and shot it in slow motion. And this, all you do is you've tested everything you can test. You've done it. You've thrown a mock train off. You've tried to figure out the explosives and all of that good stuff. But on the day, and I was on a camera up off of a cherry picker for one shot when it first goes off. And you just say, all right, rolling, action, everybody. And this model that's beautifully done goes flying off and is completely destroyed. And you hope you've got the shot on some of the cameras. Luckily, they all worked. And for protection, we actually built a second train, because why not? And shot that one too. So we blew them both up. But, you know, it was really, it's physical. You're out there. It's dangerous. It was very exciting stuff. And that was fun. And also, just visiting that set, I can remember going to the location scout, first location scout with Zemeckis, probably Dean Conde, the DP, and we were wandering around Jamestown, California. We go to this big empty area near the train tracks, and Bob says, "Welcome to Zemeckisville." And that's where he built the Western town. But to be able to walk through that town when it's finished and there's horses and guys dressed up like all the different cowboys and women in the dress and all that stuff and all the props laid out, it was really very, very cool. And I enjoyed that. It was fun.
Awesome. I think I have two more movie questions and then probably a wrap-up question.
Okay.
The film question is Alice in Wonderland. What were some of the challenges with the visual effects on Alice in Wonderland, specifically with shooting characters at different scales?
Well, the challenge came because I didn't want to break it up if I didn't have to into separate elements shot with different setups, because it slows everything down. And again, you're sacrificing interaction of Alice with whether it's the Queen or the Hat or whatever it is. So like when she's, what was it, 9 feet tall or something, when she's in the giant size stage, tried to shoot as much of that on set because it was all, not all green, but most everything was sort of a green screen situation. And most of the sets you see are all digital. A couple of them aren't, but a great deal of them are, like the palace and the Queen's chamber. You were able to, if you shot it with high enough resolution, you could blow her up. If you planned it right, where she's walking and how she has to end her walk, sit, eye lines, all that stuff. But we were able to leave things in the shot and get rid of it later because it's against green, as long as it wasn't in front of another actor. And kind of worked it out that way. It wasn't easy. It, I do remember is the super high resolution at the time camera system we were shooting with. I think they went bankrupt in the middle of the movie. So something broke. I don't know what we would have done. Luckily it didn't. And it was just a matter of sitting, figuring out what the shot that Tim Burton wanted. How do we get there without breaking up into a million different pieces? Some of it when she's a little tiny, like 6-inch character with the Hatter, we just had a little stand-in, and luckily people like Johnny Depp can handle that kind of thing so easy. It's like he doesn't care one way or the other if it's really there or not. He can make you believe it's there, so that was helpful. I have a lot of great memories on Alice. It was a creative, one of the most creative challenges I've ever had, mainly because Tim allowed me to be a lot more creatively involved than I have been on some movies, to designing a lot of things and setting things up and just creating sets and lighting the sets so it matched the stuff that was being shot on the day. And it was very exhausting, but in the end, that's one of the films I'm most proud of.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to ask you one closing wrap-up question.
Yeah, I talk too much.
Not at all. Your stories are fantastic. I think it's sort of a hybrid question in terms of kind of your advice to aspiring or active VFX practitioners, animators, filmmakers. Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important for folks to watch the classics, what they should learn from them, and what kind of advice you suggest to filmmakers to be, to advance in their career?
Well, yeah, again, it's what I've talked a little bit about already. There's been a lot of great work done in the past. Even if it's a little funky, you have to remember a lot of movies like the original Kong, that was Star Wars for that generation. They went in to watch that movie and just, oh my God, this is real. Our tastes change, we're more educated in what we see, things go on. But there can be a lot learned from like looking at Kong. Don't worry too much about how maybe jerky the animation might be sometimes. Find out how they did it, the beautiful matte paintings in it, how the puppets were built, what they were able to do back then that seemed impossible at the time with projections and all sorts. I mean, that movie is complicated. Time goes on for me, again, Harryhausen movies, I just scrutinized the hell out of those, but I also scrutinized Chuck Jones cartoons and Tex Avery cartoons. Then you can also scrutinize Ed Wood movies if you want to find out how to not do anything But in a weird, fun way, some of the crappiest films might give you a little insight as to what can go wrong, what doesn't look right. Then also I would say, because if you're creating imagery, let's still say it's imagery for movies, then you want to study, if it's in your hands, you want to study great cinematographers. You want to look at movies like Citizen Kane, Night of the Hunter, one of my favorite movies. And it goes on and on and on. You got Roger Deakins now. Every time a movie comes out that he shot, you know you're going to see amazing work. And there's some brilliant DPs out there right now doing great stuff. Well, don't just look at it and go, hey, that's cool. Look at it and go, okay, there's the key light. Why is that key light this kind of a light? How is the light moved around? Is there a back rim? What's going on with the lighting here that looks so amazing to me that I might incorporate into something I have to build for a movie, a set, whatever it is. And that's all out there. It's also acting. Are you a character animator? Are you someone that's building 3D animated figures for any number of movies now? They're all over the place. Well, hopefully you'll know something about acting and study it, study performances you love, and then figure out, wow, why is that working so well? And it might come in handy. Basically, you're going to have to immerse yourself in all of it and be obsessed with it. Dedicated, obsessed, slightly insane, and really take it all in and don't stop, because you can't stop. It changes every second. It's like technology now. People ask me, wow, what do you think about? It's like, doesn't matter. When I walk into a show and I go to an effects facility, I don't even care, in a weird way, what their technology is right at that second, because it's changed already from the last movie I did. And they're constantly amping it up. And then you can learn about it once you're there. By the time they get done telling you about it, it's already changed. So you have to be very flexible in everything you're doing. But I would say, it sounds really trite, but hard work, discipline, blah, blah, blah. And don't just learn about movies, learn about life, because that's what movies are supposed to be touching on, we hope, most of the time. And people and characters and what motivates people, and it goes on and on. So it's not easy, is it? But I would recommend just really diving in head first and never coming up for air. That's the best way to learn everything you need to know.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Ken, so much for spending time with us today. Your stories were inspiring and insightful. And I really want to thank you on behalf of everyone tuning in for helping to create so many films that are, an enduring part of our legacy, and that have brought people so much joy, which we really need more of. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today for this special episode of VFX Pro's Home Edition with our guest, VFX Game-Changer, Ken Ralston. As I mentioned, we will have the replay link up on the VES website and on our social media channels you see here on the screen sometime soon. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make plans to join us for our next Ask Me Anything, VFX Pro's Tell-All live webcast on Tuesday, October 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific with Aruna Inverson, who's the creative director and visual effects supervisor at Digital Domain. Again, information on our website and on our social media channels. So with that, I will say thank you again. That's a wrap. And everyone, stay safe and well, and go watch some joyful movies.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.